Hanukkah, like Passover, is a Jewish holiday where the observance is based not in the synagogue. Why is Passover observed more than any other holiday? Probably partially because it's at home. Chanukah too, it's at home. Matter of fact, the Talmud specifically states, mitzvah Chanukah, ner ish uveito. The mitzvah of Chanukah is a person in their household shall light the candles for Chanukah. But also, Passover and Chanukah are based around the idea of a story. Perhaps multiple narratives of the story. Just like in Passover, we tell the story of our exodus from Egypt, but we draw different lessons or stories from it, just evidenced by the massive number of different Haggadot. You can find a Haggadah that speaks to any of hundreds of different narratives, whether it's women's liberation, whether it's Soviet Jewry back in the day, whatever it is, whether it's refugees, you name it, environmental Haggadahs, etc. So too, with Chanukah, we have different narratives, and there are different lessons drawn from those narratives. And so I want to take a very few minutes today and discuss two things. Number one, question I'm going to ask everybody. What was the primary narrative that you grew up with? The primary message that you were raised with in your family of Chanukah? And what is the narrative that you need this year, or that you're holding on to this year? Let me explain just for a second what I mean by narratives for Chanukah. Because with regards to the oil can mean having faith in God. God, if you step forward, if you light that first light, God will take care of it. You do a little and God's there to make the miracle happen. It could also be about finding holiness in a small little flame. It could also be, if you look hard, there's a flame in the darkest of places of destruction, but you have to look for it. Or it could be the reality that Noam learned this week in school at Frankel Jewish Academy, the reality that the oil story was made up by the rabbis. 600 years after the Maccabees is the first recording of the story of the oil. Why? Why? There are a lot of different reasons, but one of them is that the rabbis were living under Roman oppression and they didn't want to encourage armed resistance. So they came up with a story of light as the story of Chanukah to say maybe we need to find a different way of defeating the Romans through an internal spiritual story. Does it negate? Does it mean that the story of the oil is any less real? No. What other narratives could there be? If you look at the Maccabees, you've got the small against the mighty. You could talk about religious freedom fighters. You could talk about taking matters into our own hands, or even Zionism. There's an entire Zionist narrative and series of narratives and books about defending our people in our land, pride in who we are, or the battle against assimilation. So I want to quickly ask, very quickly, what was the narrative that you grew up with? The oil, period. The oil lasted 8 days, we light 8 days. Okay, anybody else? Other narratives that you grew up with in your household? The Judah Maccabee, what about Judah Maccabee? So it's a combination of the Maccabees, but it's not the military victory of the Maccabees is the narrative, okay? Well, anybody else, other narratives that you might have grown up with that was part of your household? Here's the thing, if you grew up in Israel, it is a very different narrative that's often told. The Maccabees sneaking around. I used to love to do this when I taught elementary school and little kids, and I'd say, pretend there's elephants around and go and hit their legs. And we'd crawl around on our knees and hit the legs of the elephants and drive the elephants wild, right? Okay, so the small, guerrilla warfare against the elephants of the mighty Greeks. Anybody else? Other narratives? What are the narratives that you're holding on to this year? You've grown up, you've established your own identity, separate from just the stories that you were told. What is the narrative that resonates with you? Is it about defeating assimilation by taking a proud stand in the public space of who we are? Is it about the miracle of the oil that sometimes we need a simple story to hold on to because life gets too complicated? Or is it that the Maccabees were not a top-down organization, but a bottom-up organization? And in Israel, when the government didn't fill in the needs of the society at large after the October 7th massacre, people came from the ground to create an entire social movement, to create food sources, housing sources, missing people sources, and everything else to support soldiers and those who had been displaced. Because the Maccabees came from the ground to address something that the larger society was not addressing. What is your message this year? For me, I can only speak for me. It's, as Peter, Paul, and Mary said, don't let the light go out. Let it shine. Let it shine no matter where you are. Let it shine, a small light, or even a big light, or anything in between. Let it shine through love and tears. Let it shine because we all, at different points in our lives, are in dark places. We all, not just different points in our lives, but perhaps even different points in a given day, fall into dark places. And we need to know that there's a light in that dark place that we can turn to, and that we can put our candle to that light and light it. We need to know that that light is there. And the way that we do that is we make sure that we're part of a community. Because if you're part of a community, there'll always be at least one person with a light going. And all you need is one little flame, because it doesn't take anything away from the original flame to light another. Shabbat shalom.